Я называюсь Богдан Онищук, as most of you know. I'm honored to be the Master of Ceremonies, been asked by the Minister's Office to be the MC for today's announcement. And I'm delighted to acknowledge Arif Virani and his two colleagues, Boris Jasnowski and James Maloney, who are here to make the announcement. Without further ado, I'd also like to, by the way, recognize Ivan Baker from the provincial government, and I think Peter Milchin's coming, but he may, no? He's in the house? Okay. No great problem, but that's fine. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Arif Virani, and when he comes up, I'd appreciate if his colleagues would stand behind him or come up as well, because it is a federal announcement. Arif, as you know, is not just the member of Parliament for Parkdale High Park, but also the Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Canadian Heritage. The Honourable Melanie Joly couldn't be with us today, she's got a previous engagement in Eastern Canada that she couldn't rearrange, but her parliamentary secretary is standing in for her. I thought I would introduce Arif. He's known to all of you. He's known to all of us. We've known him, I guess, for probably 3, 4, maybe 5 years, and some of you perhaps a little bit more. But I'm not sure everybody knows sort of Arif Virani's bio, or short bio. And I think we should know it because he's a great friend of the community, and I think we're great friends of his in return. He's a lawyer by profession. He's a constitutional lawyer and a litigator, specializing in human rights and access to justice. Ties very well into Holodmor, doesn't it? Honors BA in History and Political Science from McGill University in Montreal, and his LLB at the University of Toronto. He's worked as an analyst for the Canadian Human Rights Commission in Ottawa, again, an investigator à la Commission des droits de la personne et droits de la jeunesse in Montreal, and as an assistant trial attorney prosecuting genocide at the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. What you may not know, though, quite apart from that, is that he's actually a former Ugandan Asian refugee to Canada. Came to Canada many, many years ago, before going to university and the degrees and the profession that he's developed as a young man. And of course, he's been a Canadian for, well, I didn't ask him how many years, but it's certainly been probably 20. Arif is also the founder of the Toronto Legal Aid Clinic, SALCO, and he's the recipient, and I would know this because I went to the U of T Law School as well, of the Harold G. Fox Scholarship and the 2008 Wilson Pritchard, Rob Pritchard Award in recognition of his contributions to the legal profession and his community. So he's here to make an announcement on behalf of his minister, who he serves as parliamentary secretary and doing a terrific job, stepping in for his boss. So with that, could I please ask you to welcome Arif Virani, and I ask him for his announcement along with his colleagues. Arif.
First of all, thank you very much, Bob. That was a very kind and generous introduction. Didn't expect that. I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here. I want to acknowledge some people that are here with us today. President Garod, my federal colleagues, Boris and James, my provincial counterpart, Ivan, Mr. Onishchuk, I'll try and use people's last names because it's a formal occasion, Ms. Zarowitz, Ms. Roman, Ms. Reva, Mr. Romanishin, Mr. Kotsev, Ms. Kotsev, Mr. Hitmanchuk, and Mr. Stetsev. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames and messieurs, first of all, dobry den. Thank you very much for being here today. I want to start by acknowledging the territory that we are on, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and most recently the Mississaugas of the New Credit. Second, I wanted to acknowledge the passing of a very important day on February 20th, the day on which we mark the commemoration of the heroes of the Heavenly 100, the protesters who lost their lives fighting for freedom and democracy during the Euromaidan protests in Kiev. And yes, Boris is to thank for my good pronunciation of Kiev. Friends, as the Member of Parliament for Parkdale High Park, and as Mr. Onishik mentioned, the Parliamentary Secretary for Multiculturalism to the Minister of Canadian Heritage, who regrets not being able to be here personally, I do enjoy the chance to meet directly with people in organizations that are helping to promote inclusion and encourage diversity. J'aimerais juste ajouter quelques petits mots en français pour Mme Joly, mais aussi parce que c'est nécessaire en termes de député fédéral. Le Canada tire à sa force des biens des éléments, le respect des droits et libertés, l'ouverture d'esprit, notre caractère multiculturel et la diversité de notre société. It's that very diversity that helps us shape us as a country and what really makes us stronger. In Toronto, is a great example of this particular strength. We live in an incredibly multicultural city with a population that represents many, many different ethnic and cultural communities. It's a diversity that gives this city a particularly dynamic character and reflects what makes Canada in its entirety such a great place to live. But today I want to give special recognition to the Ukrainian Canadian community that is here in Toronto and in the GTA region, as well as right around the country. Canada is home to a very vibrant Ukrainian Canadian community. The folks in this room know these stats better than I do, but there's nearly 1.3 million people strong in the diaspora that calls Canada home, that traces its roots to Ukraine. Those people, you, have made immeasurable contributions to building up this country, contributions to building Canada and helping forge a strong and enduring relationship between Canada and Ukraine. On a personal note, as many of you will know, I take great pride in the fact that each year the Ukrainian Canadian diaspora gathers for a weekend in September in my very own riding of Parkdale High Park with the Bloor West Toronto Ukrainian Festival. It's the single largest festival of its kind in North America, where people, as many as 500,000 people per year, congregate, and they come to celebrate Ukrainian culture and to celebrate the immense contributions that Ukrainians have made to Canada. And I know many of you are involved in organizing that very festival. Yes, I'm looking at the back there. But it's in that spirit today that I'm pleased to be here to announce not just one, but two important initiatives. So the first announcement relates to an announcement that was made by Minister Joly literally just this afternoon with respect to the official launch of the Paul Yuzyk Youth Initiative for Multiculturalism. So that's an annual funding initiative that will award grants of up to $1,000 to dozens of youth and young Canadians for projects around the country that promote multiculturalism, diversity, and inclusion in their communities. That funding will empower young leaders around the country to make a positive impact in their communities while promoting projects that foster pluralism and address things like racism and discrimination. The new initiative will honor the legacy of the late Senator Paul Yuzyk, again, a persona known to everyone in this room, a pioneer in the development and promotion of Canadian multiculturalism, and it will help by inspiring our young leaders to continue to advance cultural understanding and inclusion in communities right across the country. And again, the involvement of Ukrainian Canadians like Senator Paul Yuzyk in the advent of multiculturalism in Canada cannot be overstated. It was no coincidence that when Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau announced the adoption of official multiculturalism as official Canadian policy in 1971, he did so at a meeting on the Winnipeg Prairie right before the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. The second reason why I'm here today and why Bob asked us to come and speak is because we're here to announce our important support for an important community project that is a great example of our government's steadfast commitment to diversity. Last year, Minister Joly had announced an investment of $5.5 million per year to the project component of multiculturalism funding, a program that we call Interaction. Interaction is exactly what it sounds like. It's about bringing communities together, putting them in dialogue with one another, in an attempt to build bridges between different groupings. Given the rise in populism and hate crimes we've seen that target particular groups, as a government we also made a conscious decision that it was important to target multiculturalism funding on projects which eliminate racism, discrimination, and prejudice. When we issued a public call for applications to this project, and Mihailin is in the back, he's one of the staffers that helped deal with some of those projects, we received 250 project applications from communities right around the country. That enthusiasm actually wasn't surprising to me or the people that I work with, because we know that Canadians are proud of our diversity. We also know that Canadians are cognizant of the need to be vigilant in the fight against division and against prejudice. Canadians know that without active programming supported by the federal government that builds bridges between different racial, ethnic, and cultural groups, we will not get to the point where official multiculturalism must lead, the place that Paul Yuzyk and people like Pierre Trudeau envisage, where we don't just simply tolerate difference, but we celebrate difference. That's why I'm delighted to be here today. I'm very proud to be here today to announce that the Canada-Ukraine Foundation will receive $1.45 million over the next 3 years for its Holodmor National Awareness Tour project. Through the Holodmor Mobile Classroom, or the Holodmor Bus, as I affectionately call it, the National Awareness Tour will bring awareness about the Holodmor famine genocide of 1932-33 to broad audiences across Canada. And I'll be candid with you. Bob was very kind in terms of his introduction about me, in terms of my knowledge of the community and my interaction with the Ukrainian community. But I'll admit to you that though a human rights and constitutional lawyer who had dealt with genocide at the Rwandan tribunal, I'll be candid in telling you that I did not know a great deal about the Holodmor until I entered public life as an elected representative. But it has been entities like that very bus that is right outside that have been instrumental in opening my eyes, and I have no doubt in opening thousands of eyes of people around the country to the horrors of the state-imposed famine genocide of 1932-33, where Stalin planned deliberately the death through starvation of millions of Ukrainians. It is only, and I believe this in my heart of hearts, it is only by learning about these atrocities, by keeping their memory alive, that communities and we as a nation can work to ensure that the hatred and intolerance that led to the Holodmor do not ever recur. And the lessons from that bus, the lessons that will continue to be told around this country, remain just as relevant today, because they inform the work that we do as elected representatives on a daily basis to strengthen our democracy and to strengthen our protection of human rights here and abroad. But I also think it's fitting that we make these announcements in the same year that we mark the 30th anniversary of the passage of the Canadian Multiculturalism Act. That was passed in 1988. In this year of all years, we recommit to building a positive and inclusive future for our country, to showing the world that our diversity is truly our greatest strength. And I'll refer back to what Bob mentioned at the outset. If you can take a Ugandan Muslim refugee like myself of Indian ancestry, put him representing 9,000 Ukrainians in Bloor West Village, and have him engaging on and learning about issues that relate to the Ukrainian diaspora, surely Canadian multiculturalism is doing something right. So I'll just end by saying I applaud the Canada-Ukraine Foundation and the entire Ukrainian Canadian community for the important work that you do and that you continue to do in communities right around this country. And for that work, I would say a heartfelt Дуже дякую. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Arif, thank you very, very much for both announcements. Senator Yuzyk was a dear, dear friend, and a dear friend not just of the community, but a personal friend of many of us. And I think that award for scholarships is a great way to honor him. And with and with respect to the bus award, as I guess you and I would call it, we will do you proud, as I think we did you proud for the first 3 years. And this will be the repeat encore. It's $1 million bus that is there with lessons that we'll hear about a little bit more a little later, but which we'll be teaching right across the country for tolerance, civility, and against hate, and against bullying and racism. But to thank you formally, I'd like to ask the chair of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress National, who's a partner in this project, to formally thank you and to bring his remarks. Paul Grud.
Thank you, Bogdan. Honored Holodmor survivors, dear parliamentarians, dignitaries, and honored guests. I want to start off by, on behalf of the 1.4 million Ukrainian Canadians, the new census is now rounded up to 1.4 million. No, we're very proud of that there's actual growth in the community. So that's wonderful news to see. I want to thank you in particular as Parliamentary Secretary and Member of Parliament for this very important announcement. On behalf of the community, I want to thank Minister Joly, the Prime Minister, and the Government of Canada for its strong support on this particular issue, but also many, many other issues that are important to our community and to all Canadians. Today's announcement of 1.45 million to support the Holodmor National Awareness Tour and the Holodmor Mobile Classroom for the next 3 years is really, truly going to be impactful. Again, we want to welcome Arif Virani, together with his colleagues Boris Jasnowski, James Maloney, and Member of Provincial Parliament and Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Finance, Yvonne Baker, and many, many other honored guests. I also want to recognize the President of the Canadian Ethnocultural Council, Mr. Dominic Campioni, who's joined us as well today. Welcome, Dominic. UCC is proud to be one of 4 partners on this initiative, and I'd like to recognize and thank our partners, that being the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, who is the lead on the project, the Ukrainian Canadian Research and Documentation Center, and the Holodmor Research and Education Consortium. See, we can get along as Ukrainians. I also especially want to recognize and thank the leadership of Bogdan Lustruk. He really, truly has been a driving force on this initiative, right from its very concept and driving it through, when some people looked at him a little bit skeptically about having a Holodmor bus, but he saw the vision, and we've seen after several years of its activity how impactful it has been. So, Bogdan, congratulations on your leadership, and thank you. Now, although a driving force, Bogdan did not do this alone. He's had many supporters, many people who've helped in leading this project, in particular Victor Hedmanchuk, Danny Dzirovich, Roma Dzirovich, Valentina Kureliu, and many, many others. So thank you all for your vision and for your leadership. We are very grateful to the Government of Canada for its strong support of Holodmor education and recognition of historical crimes against humanity and genocides. We expect that later this year or early next year, we will also be participating in the unveiling of the Memorial to the Victims of Communism in Ottawa, which Arif Virani has had a significant hand in, as has Minister Joly. So their commitment to recognizing historical genocides in order for us to learn those histories so they do not repeat themselves continues on and on. So thank you, Arif. Together we will teach Canadians our shared responsibility to stand up to tyranny, oppression, and human rights abuses around the world. This year we commemorate the 85th anniversary of the Holodmor. We honor the many millions of victims of the Holodmor and pay tribute to their survivors, whose courage in sharing their story ensured that this terrible genocide did not remain hidden from the world. As the Holodmor Mobile Classroom travels across Canada, our many Ukrainian Canadian Congress branches and provincial councils have actively worked to help coordinate and promote the work of this mobile classroom. We know that this is cutting-edge model for human rights education, which other communities see as a successful example how to connect with young people. I'd like to also thank and mention other funding partners and supporters of the Holodmor National Awareness Tour, in particular the provinces of Ontario and Manitoba, the Temerte Family Foundation, the Hnutovich Family Foundation, the Petro Yuzyk Education Foundation, and the Hutsudyak Foundation. Thank you all for your support. We're also very pleased to add in another very exciting announcement today, and I'd like to also express thanks on behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress that we're delighted to see the memory of the late Senator Paul Yuzyk will continue through the Youth Leadership Award, the Senator Paul Yuzyk Youth Multiculturalism Initiative. As we know, Senator Yuzyk was a leader in developing and bringing forward the concept of multiculturalism, a concept which is now widely embraced and accepted as the heart of our society. This micro-grant initiative will provide opportunities for young Canadians from all backgrounds to appreciate Senator Paul Yuzyk's contributions to public life, and in particular to multiculturalism policy. So once again, thank you, Arif Virani, Parliamentary Secretary for Multiculturalism, for working with the Yuzyk family and the Ukrainian community to develop today's announcement. Щиро дякую, merci beaucoup. Thank you for your vision and for your support.
And next, I'd like to ask Victor Hetmanchuk to formally thank the Parliamentary Secretary and the Minister on behalf of CUF. Victor is the chair of CUF. Victor?
I wasn't prepared to make a speech, but I'm going to wing it. It was my great pleasure on behalf of the Canada-Ukraine Foundation to thank the Government of Canada for its long-term commitment and sustainability of Canada-Ukraine Foundation. You may not realize, but over the last 3 years, the Government of Canada has given us $2.6 million, and with this 1.5, that leads us to a donation of taxpayers' money of $4.2 million, which is very significant, and I think the community, the Ukrainian community, should start to realize how much the government is investing in supporting Ukrainian causes. So officially, on behalf of the board of the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, thank you very much. I hope to see you all here for the next 30 years. Thank you.
I thought you were writing a big speech last night, you told me. Anyway, well done, because we do want to have time for a tour of the bus for our honored guest. So I'd just like to recognize a couple of people, the major sponsors who Paula already has mentioned. I don't know if Marta Ignatovic is here. She said she would be coming. Ihor is skiing. But certainly their foundation, the Temerte Foundation, the Yuzyk Foundation, and Jurko Huculak and Roma Huculak, the Huculak Foundation, have been very strong supporters. And not just that, the federal grant didn't allow us, this is just a little bit of inside baseball, to spend their money on the first grant with respect to hardware being like the bus and the stuff inside the bus. So that $1 million bus had to be financed a different way. And those are the sponsors who basically financed the bus. It's there as a long-term asset. It's gone through 45,000 kilometers, not miles so far, 3 coast-to-coast trips, but it's got a lot more sort of still in store and will last the community and us for a long time. Our partners on the project, I'd like to particularly thank Frank Sissons, the chair of HREC, who's here today, and Marta, the executive director. And I think Mikola Dashko is also in the audience somewhere for UCRDC, the Research and Documentation Center. But thirdly, and very importantly, a gentleman that most of you would not know, his name is Greg Neely. He's the CEO of Forge Media and Design. He's the guy, and his is the firm, who masterminded the interior interactive program that we gave them. Well, we didn't give them the program. We gave them Valya's lesson, and we said, we want this as the latest state-of-the-art interactive program that will knock the socks off high school students. That was 3 years ago. He delivered, and he's with us today, and I'd like to thank him for that. And I'd like to thank him for the second lesson which he's doing, which you're going to hear about in just about a minute. But finally, I want to thank him because he's the guy that put the bus up for a couple of awards. One of which is the European International A Design Awards, where we won gold in the field of education, in excellent immersive educational experience, is what they call that design. The second one we just learned about yesterday, which will be awarded at the end of March. We're a finalist, which means we get either bronze, silver, or gold. Not sure which one. And it's at the 2018 APEX, which is a worldwide conference of publishing excellence. And publishing includes electronic, digital, interactive, social media in Las Vegas at the end of March. we'll let you know whether we repeated with gold or whether we come back as Canadian silver. But I'm just delighted with both of them. Thank you very much, Greg. And so finally, and I hope I wouldn't be boring anybody with this, I wanted to tell the parliamentary secretary and his colleagues, and through them the minister, what we're going to be doing with some of their money for this next 3-year tour. And so I want to introduce the lady, the teacher at St. Joe, Michael Powers, who designed and has written the second lesson for the bus. And I'd like her to tell you a little bit about what that lesson is, why it's important in terms of teaching students right across Canada. And the lesson is called Breaking the Sound Barrier, Raising Voices Out of Silence. Could I ask you to welcome Nadia Guerrera?
Thank you. So thank you for that kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here today with all of you, and I'm so happy to hear about the federal funding that you guys have so graciously given to this community for this initiative. So being on the front lines of education, I can tell you that teaching a history lesson is one thing, but giving students an opportunity to feel it and experience it in a multisensory way just brings it to life in a whole other level. It gets them to be able to understand that the statistics that we talk about around, over 5 million people being systematically starved to death by Stalin, they walk off that bus and they know that every single one of those numbers is a person's life, is a person with a real story that should never be forgotten. And that is so, so important because it brings the whole Holodmor to life and keeps it alive so that those people are never forgotten. I'm not Ukrainian, although with a name like Nadia, people get confused. And I get asked a lot, why do you teach about the Holodmor? And there's really so many reasons. But number one, I say to people, this isn't just a Ukrainian story, this is a human story. So it needs to be told, number one. Number two, this is such a raw experience of injustice that students can relate to. I mean, taking away somebody's food and their ability to feed their family, it brings up a visceral feeling of injustice, and it gives students a hunger for justice. And the third reason I think it's so poignant today is that beyond the fact that this happened was a horrific cover-up of this genocide that went on for almost 70 years. Am I right, Frank? Is that the right amount? Okay, so about 70 years of people actually not knowing that this happened. So students really engage with that, and they feel it makes them pay attention. So that's why I teach about these things. On our second lesson, so if you've got a chance to go on the bus, and you'll probably have some time today, you would have experienced Pani Coreyu's first lesson where she talks about this happened, this is the Holodmor, this is what happened, and students have an opportunity to interact with historical artifacts and documents to be able to know what happened, how did the world react, and it sort of call them to this awareness. In the second lesson, what we wanted to focus on is Stalin's war on information. How was it that this story, this horrific tragedy, was hidden from the world for so long? And so what we did working with Rek and Forge was uncover how is that possible? How is it that journalists that were in Ukraine at the time in Moscow didn't report the truth, if that's their responsibility? So what was the culture of fear that was created, and how did that go on? So we want students to understand that, and it's never been more poignant, perhaps, than the fact that we live in a society where students are getting information from every single angle, and it's really hard to distinguish between what's a fact and what's misinformation. So we wanted to, in this lesson, focus on developing critical thinking skills and media literacy. And then calling students to global citizenship, active global citizenship, so that they too could understand the importance of speaking truth to power for the sake of justice. And knowing that And every single day and every single moment, they matter, and the world needs them to do just that. So that is what we're doing in our lesson. How do we do it? We look at specific journalists and figures during the time in Moscow or just afterwards. One of them, actually, a Canadian female journalist from Toronto named Ria Kleiman, who actually was orphaned, was Jewish, lost her leg to a streetcar accident, and there she was in Russia and rented a car and went out, even despite Stalin's ban on journalists leaving Moscow, to go find out what was really happening. So we showcase these 6 figures, including Ria Kleiman, so that students can interact with them in real time. We actually have scripts and characters and amazing team working on that. And then from there, students take what they've learned and have an opportunity to reflect on it and put it into action, because hearing all these atrocities and knowing what happened and feeling the injustice is one aspect. Giving students the opportunity to be able to do something with that energy and then impact others with what they've done is the next step, because it calls them to action and gives them a forum through which to act. So then they create a piece of it will be like a digital piece of art, a collective piece of art where they can express what they've learned. So that's what we're doing. So that's how we're teaching students to break the sound barrier and themselves raise their voices from silence and ensure that those voices that have been silenced around the world will resound and echo forevermore, including those who passed during the Holodmor. I think that's pretty much all I can say. It's been a real pleasure to work with Rek, with Marta and Anastasia, and of course with Forge. I'm really excited because I believe next week we're going to be seeing the first design aspect of it and how it's going to get put into action. We'll probably be beta testing it in another month or so, so certain schools and classes will have the opportunity to get out there and see it. But this is groundbreaking work, and I just feel so honored and privileged to be able to have taken part in it, and thank you for investing in it further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadia. And those 6 heroes that she talked about, they're actually called heroes, one of which was a Ukrainian from Halichina who was in the Austrian parliament and tried to get to the League of Nations and got to the League of Nations, but the League of Nations weren't able to do anything with Russia. And Russia, of course, played the big stick. But those 6 heroes are going to be filmed by Ariadna Okhrimovich, who's sitting in the back row, and I want to recognize and acknowledge her for the contribution she's making to this second lesson as well. So in closing, just one other item. I'd like to focus on the fact that this is the 85th anniversary. This year is the 85th anniversary of the Holodmor. I think it's in the minister's announcement, press release out there, and I think it's in our announcement. I know it's in our announcement on our side. And February in 1933 was one of the worst months of the Holodmor, certainly for all of the victims who perished during that month and during March. So in closing, I'd ask all of you to stand and for us to remember with a moment of silence all of those victims who perished in the Great Famine, the genocide, 1932-33. Thank you. So with that, the press conference is over. Arif and his colleagues would like to tour the bus. We will do that. I think the 2 TV channels want to be there with them. But before we leave, I'm sorry, I should have added this. Orest statue and the League of Ukrainian Canadians have been also not an official partner, but certainly a partner, and certainly with a lot of materials that they've prepared on the Holodmor, which we've used. And I think he has a gift for our federal colleagues, and I know Roma has a gift for our federal colleagues. So, Otis, first over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Mr. Varani, on behalf of all of us here today, in particular the Ukrainian Canadian Congress and the League of Ukrainian Canadians, I would like to present you with a copy of our documentary publication, Holodmor, the Ukrainian Genocide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Varani. I would just like to add that the Ukrainica Research Institute donated 300 copies of this publication to the Holodmor bus, and I think it has turned out to be very successful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you, Otis. And I think what we've got is, we've got more than just one of these, but I'll give you the one, the official one, for you from the Holodmor tour, which has our latest videos and a little bit of information on the tour itself. And I've got yours in the bus. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Harif and your colleagues. And we stand adjourned. Okay.